You have looked at your life from every angle. You have counted what is in your account and what is owed. You have measured the distance between where you are and where you need to be. You have looked at your options, your contacts, your skills, your opportunities, and you have arrived at the same conclusion every time. There is no path, not a hidden one, not a slow one, not even a difficult one, just the flat, silent absence of any visible road forward. And something inside you is beginning to believe that the absence of a path is the final answer. But there is a teaching, old and precise and often misread, that begins exactly at the moment your visible options disappear. There is a man who studied the laws of wealth, not from theory but from poverty, from pressure, from the edge of nothing. And what he discovered was not a strategy. It was a law that does not operate through your plan, a law that does not wait for your permission, a law that begins moving the moment the finite mind admits it cannot find the way on its own. His name was Wallace Wattles, and the first thing he would say to you is this: the absence of a visible path is not the end of your story. It is the exact beginning of where Source starts to work. You are not imagining the limits. They are real in the visible world. There is a number in your account that does not lie. There is a salary that has a ceiling, and you have seen that ceiling for years. There are bills that arrive with the same regularity as the sunrise, and they do not pause while you try to figure out the solution. The visible world around you has presented itself as evidence, consistent and heavy, and every morning you wake up and the evidence is still there. This is not delusion. This is the reality of what you can see with your eyes. The problem is not that you are lying to yourself about the difficulty. The problem is that you have accepted the visible evidence as the complete truth. The mind naturally measures the future through the channels it can identify. You look at your employer and calculate how long before a raise, and the number is discouraging. You look at the market and wonder whether there is space for something new, and the noise is overwhelming. You look at your education, your background, your age, and you try to construct a logical path from where you are to where you need to be. And when the logic fails, when the channels dry up or close completely, the mind does something very specific. It concludes that the future has been decided. It translates the absence of a visible method into a verdict on possibility itself. Many people in this situation have already tried something. They have studied, applied, attempted, invested time or money or hope in a direction that did not lead where they expected. The failure of that attempt left a mark, not just a financial one, an inner one. Something inside said, "See, you tried, and it did not work." And that voice has become louder every time another door appeared to close. Every rejection, every delay, every plan that dissolved before it reached completion became another piece of evidence that the visible world is sealed against you. This is not weakness. This is what happens to a sincere person who has been measuring the future through visible channels alone. Think about what the visible channels look like right now. A job that cannot carry the weight you need it to carry. A business idea that needs capital you do not have. A skill that the market does not seem to want in the way you can offer it. An industry that is changing faster than you can adapt. A network of people who are struggling in the same direction you are. The visible supply chains in your life may look like they have reached their limit, and nothing you have tried in the visible world has yet produced the change you need. So you sit with that. You carry that weight. And you wonder in the quiet moments whether you are simply one of those people for whom the path will never appear. What makes this pressure almost unbearable is that you do not just feel it financially. You feel it in your identity. When there is no visible path to a better life, the mind begins to construct a story about who you are. It begins to say that the absence of opportunity is a statement about your value, that the closed doors are a judgment, that the people who found a way must have had something you do not have. The financial pressure and the identity wound become the same wound. And so you are not just looking for money, you are looking for proof that you are someone for whom a way can still open. That the universe has not made an exception of you. Debt adds a dimension that the mind cannot easily ignore. It is not simply that there is no income coming in at the level you need. It is that the gap between what is coming in and what is going out has its own momentum, its own compound pressure. Every month the gap persists, the sense of falling behind deepens. The mind tries to calculate how much time remains before the situation becomes truly irreversible, and those calculations are never comforting. There is a specific kind of fear that lives in the arithmetic of debt and insufficient income. It is relentless. It returns every morning. It speaks before you are fully awake. Perhaps the deepest pain is the feeling that you should have figured this out by now. There is an expectation, built by culture and comparison, that by a certain point in life, a person should have a stable foundation, a clear direction, a visible path. When that path has not appeared, when the foundation feels uncertain, there is a grief attached to it. Not just the practical fear of not having enough, but the quiet grief of wondering whether the life you hoped for was always out of reach, whether the dreams were naive, whether the effort you gave to the visible world was simply not enough, and whether any amount of effort could have changed the outcome. But here is what must be said clearly before we go any further. Every single element you have just felt recognized, every pressure you have been carrying, every calculation that has failed, every door that has not opened, every year that has passed without the change you needed, none of that is evidence that the law has failed you. None of that is proof that the path will never come. Every single piece of that visible evidence is exactly what it looks like when a person has been trying to produce a new life through the visible world alone, without understanding the law that operates beneath it. That law has not failed. That law has not even been addressed yet. And that is precisely what this teaching is about. There is a contradiction at the center of your spiritual life that most people in your situation never fully name. You believe, or you say you believe, in something greater. You believe in God or the universe or source or divine supply or a higher power that can make a way where there is no way. You have heard the teachings. You have felt the truth of them. You have spoken the words of faith. You have prayed or meditated or affirmed or visualized. And then you have gotten up from that practice and returned to the one question the anxious mind cannot stop asking. But where is the path? And in that return, in that demand for a visible route before you will release your fear, the contradiction is fully revealed. You believe in the source, but you require the source to operate the way your fear demands it operate. This is not a small error. This is the central one. Because what you are doing when you insist on a visible path before you release your anxiety is not prudence. It is not responsibility. It is a specific form of distrust dressed in the language of practicality. The mind says, I am not refusing to trust. I am simply waiting for some evidence before I let go of my fear. But that is precisely the order the source cannot meet, because the law does not work in that sequence. The law does not deliver the path to the mind that is still gripping fear. The path forms from the condition of the mind that has already released fear. And you have been waiting for the path in order to release the fear, when the truth is you must release the fear before the path can form. Most people who engage with spiritual prosperity teachings never see this error because it is disguised as wisdom. It does not feel like distrust. It feels like careful discernment. The inner voice that says wait until you can see a real way does not sound like fear. It sounds like the voice of a responsible adult who has been burned before and knows better than to get excited before there is something concrete to get excited about. The language of fear in a spiritually educated person is not loud. It does not say I am terrified and I do not believe. It says I want to make sure, I want to see some evidence. I want a reasonable indication that this is going to work before I fully commit to faith. What happens then is that the viewer lives in a permanent half-trust. The inner life says, I believe, I trust, I have faith. But beneath that declared belief, the operating condition of the mind is still, I need a sign before I stop calculating, and that operating condition, that invisible background posture of the mind, is what the source receives as the signal, not the declared belief, the actual inner condition. And the actual inner condition is still one of guarded holding, of watchful waiting, of faith that has not yet separated itself from the demand for visible proof. The mind does what it was designed to do. It looks for evidence. It tries to construct certainty from what it can observe. This is not a moral failure. It is the design of the rational mind. The rational mind is built to manage the visible world by reading visible signals. When you ask the rational mind to trust an invisible source for provision, that has not yet materialized in any visible form, the rational mind does the only thing it knows how to do. It asks for data. It asks for precedent. It asks for a mechanism it can understand. And because the source operates through an intelligence that is not confined to the maps the rational mind has already drawn, the rational mind cannot find what it is looking for. So it returns to fear. Here is where the contradiction becomes almost painful to see clearly. The viewer is not just waiting for a path. The viewer is holding a specific mental image of what a path would look like. There is an expected form. Maybe it is a job offer at a higher salary. Maybe it is a business suddenly gaining clients. Maybe it is an inheritance or a settlement or an unexpected windfall from a familiar channel. And because the source has not delivered the provision through the expected form, the viewer concludes that nothing is happening. But the source is not limited to the form the viewer has already imagined. The source may be preparing a door that does not resemble any door the viewer has seen before. And by holding rigidly to the expected form of delivery, the viewer is already closed to the actual delivery. This goes deeper still. There is a strange emotional loyalty that keeps many people chained to the absence of a path. The habit of believing that your situation is fixed, that the limitations are real and permanent, that the visible world as it stands is the complete report on what is possible, has become part of the identity. It is familiar. It is what you have known for long enough that releasing it feels dangerous. Not because you prefer poverty. Nobody prefers poverty. But because the belief that the path will not come has been held for so long that trusting in a way you cannot see feels more frightening than continuing to live with the familiar weight of limitation. The old belief feels safer because it is known. The new trust requires letting go of the known. This contradiction is not evidence that you are spiritually weak. It is evidence that you are a sincere person who has not yet been shown the exact point where the error lives. You are not someone who lacks faith because you cannot see the path. You are someone who has been taught by everything the visible world has shown you to believe that the visible world is the complete report on what is possible. That teaching is the error, not your character, not your worthiness. The teaching you absorbed from experience, the one that says no visible path means no possible future. That teaching is precisely what must be disrupted. And Wallace Wattles spent his entire life finding the law that disrupts it. Wallace Wattles wrote at the beginning of the 20th century, from within a life that knew real scarcity, real failure, real years of effort that did not produce the result. He did not write from abundance about how to stay abundant. He wrote from the edge of poverty, after decades of searching, after finding a set of principles that he tested against the hardest conditions of his own life. And what he found was not a technique. It was not a strategy you apply to the visible world. It was a description of a law governing the relationship between the thinking mind and the substance from which all material things take form. He called it the formless substance, the thinking stuff that fills all space and permeates all visible matter. Not in the language of modern mysticism, but as a direct philosophical claim about the nature of reality. Wattles believed, and taught with a kind of calm certainty, that everything that exists in the visible world, every channel of wealth, every resource, every opportunity, every form of provision, was first a form that took shape from this invisible, intelligent, responsive substance. That before anything becomes visible, it exists first as potential within something that the human mind cannot see, cannot measure, cannot calculate, but can relate to. This is the point where most readers either accept the teaching or dismiss it, and the ones who dismiss it usually do so because they interpret it as fantasy, as if Wattles is saying that you simply imagine things and they appear without effort or connection to the real world. But that is a complete misreading. Wattles was not teaching passive fantasy. He was teaching the precise conditions under which the invisible becomes visible. He was teaching that the thinking mind, when held in a specific relationship with Source, when the image is clear, when the faith is real, when the action is aligned, when gratitude is operating, creates a current between the visible and the invisible that moves real events, real contacts, real opportunities, and real resources in real time. What Wattles understood was that the visible channels through which money and provision move are not the source of the money and provision. The job is not the source. The client is not the source. The investment is not the source. The inheritance is not the source. These are channels. Channels through which the source moves supply to the person whose inner condition is aligned with receiving. When the channel closes, the source has not closed. The channel has closed, the source remains. The source may be preparing a different channel. The source may be redirecting supply toward a form the mind has not yet anticipated. The source has not stopped. Only the channel has stopped. Wattles was making a claim that most people in financial fear have never been able to fully receive, not because they lack intelligence, but because the mind in fear is locked to the visible. The claim was this: wealth does not begin in the visible world. It begins in the relationship between the thinker and the formless source. And when that relationship is correctly established, when the image is held, when faith is operating, when gratitude is real, when action is taken on the nearest available thing, the supply organizes itself in the visible world through channels the thinker often cannot predict in advance. The visible path does not have to exist before the supply begins moving. The supply begins moving in response to the inner condition. This is a claim that requires careful examination because it has been both diluted and exaggerated. On one side, people have turned it into a passive wish list. Imagine the wealth and it appears without effort. Wattles directly rejected this interpretation. He was explicit that the certain way required action, not frantic action, not anxious forcing, but daily, intelligent, grateful, purposeful action taken on whatever was in front of the person at any given moment. The supply does not bypass effort, but the effort is guided by inner alignment rather than by panic and calculation. On the other side, people have turned Wattles into a motivational author about hard work and positive thinking. This is also a misreading. The central claim of his teaching is not that positivity produces wealth. It is that the inner relationship between the individual mind and the formless source is a real operative connection that responds to specific inner conditions. The conditions are a clear mental image of the desired life, a genuine gratitude for what already exists, a specific faith that operates before proof appears, and an action taken each day on the nearest right thing. These conditions, held together, constitute what he called the certain way. The deeper teaching is that you are not trying to convince the universe to give you something it is withholding. You are not bargaining, begging, or performing. You are aligning the condition of your thinking mind with the intelligence of the formless source. The source is already inclined toward your increase. It is not an obstacle. It is not withholding. It is not punishing. The source is, in Wattles' framing, a thinking substance that responds to the thought impressions it receives from minds that are operating in the certain way. It is not indifferent. It is responsive, but it responds to the actual inner condition of the thinker, not to the stated desire alone. What does that mean for the person standing at the edge of no visible path? It means that the absence of a visible path is not the source's way of saying no. It may be the source clearing the old channel because a new one is forming. It may be the source creating the condition of need that produces the level of alignment required for the new life to emerge. It may be the source allowing the finite mind to exhaust its own strategies so that it finally releases its grip on the plan and returns to the relationship with source that is the actual mechanism of supply. The closed door is not a verdict. It may be a preparation. Wattles taught that the formless source is in the business of expansion. It does not withhold. Its nature is to express more life, more provision, more capacity, more form. When a person is aligned with that nature through clear vision, genuine faith, and purposeful action, they are not pushing against the source. They are moving with a current that was already flowing in the direction of their increase. The problem has never been whether the source is willing to provide. The problem has always been the inner condition of the person trying to receive. And the inner condition that blocks supply is almost always the one that demands a visible path before it will trust the invisible intelligence behind all paths. This is why Wattles did not begin his teaching with technique. He began with relation. Before the image, before the action, before the gratitude, there is the establishment of a real inner relationship with the source. A relationship that acknowledges you are not separate from the formless substance. you are an expression of it. The thing you desire is already potential within the same substance that composes you and everything around you. The desire for increase is not a selfish deviation from spiritual life. It is the formless substance expressing its own nature of expansion through you. You wanting more is not greed. It is Source wanting more life through the channel that is you. And when that relationship is established, when the person genuinely knows that they are not separate from the Source, that the desire for increase is aligned with the nature of Source, that the formless substance is working in response to the condition of their mind, something fundamental changes. The anxiety does not disappear immediately, but it loses its position as the governing intelligence, and the mind begins to be able to hold the image without requiring the path, because it now understands that the path is not its responsibility to construct. The path is the movement of Source in response to aligned thought. The responsibility of the thinker is to hold the image, maintain the faith, express gratitude, and act on whatever is nearest and right. The teaching of Wallace Wattles has been passed through many hands since the early 1900s. It has been simplified, packaged, adapted, and in many cases reduced to something that sounds pleasant, but has lost its operative power. The version that most people encounter today says, "Think positive thoughts and you will attract good things." And while there is something true beneath that simplification, the reduction strips away the precise mechanism that Wattles was describing. The original teaching was not about positive emotion as a magnet. It was about a specific relationship between the thinker and a real, responsive, intelligent source. That distinction changes everything. For the person right now who sees no visible path, the forgotten meaning of the teaching is this: when your visible options have run out, you have not reached the limit of what is possible. You have reached the limit of what the finite mind can calculate from the visible world. That is a completely different limit. The finite mind can only plan forward from what it can already see. It can only project pathways through channels it can already identify. It can only construct solutions from the resources it can already measure. And when those channels are closed, when those resources are absent, when those pathways have dissolved, the finite mind concludes that the total set of possibilities has been exhausted. But the finite mind does not have access to the total set of possibilities. Only the Source does. Wattles was saying that the real supply of wealth and provision does not come from the channels the mind can already see. It comes from an intelligence that can move through channels the mind has not yet seen, through people who have not yet been introduced, through ideas that have not yet occurred, through timing that cannot yet be calculated, through forms of provision that do not yet have a visible name. The Source is not limited to the routes the viewer has already imagined. The Source moves through the full range of the possible, which is far larger than the full range of the currently visible. This means something very specific for the person who has no visible path. It means that the correct response to the absence of a visible path is not to force harder, not to calculate more desperately, not to pursue the closed channels with greater anxiety. The correct response is to shift the inner relationship, to establish, as Wattles prescribed, a real mental image of the desired life held with genuine gratitude and real faith, not as a desperate wish, but as a clear and definite picture held with certainty. And then to take whatever action is available and right in the present moment, without requiring that action to be visibly connected to the outcome before you can commit to it. The forgotten meaning is that you do not need to see the whole path before you begin. You need to hold the image of the destination, release the demand for a specific route, maintain the faith that the route is forming in response to your alignment, and act faithfully on whatever step is nearest. This is not passivity. This is not wishful thinking. This is the exact sequence Wattles described as the certain way. And the reason it is called certain is not because it is guaranteed in a commercial sense. It is called certain because it is the law. When the conditions are genuinely met, the law produces the result. Not perhaps, not maybe, the law operates. For the viewer who has been in the habit of demanding a visible path before trusting, this represents a fundamental reversal. Instead of waiting for the path and then trusting, you trust first, and the path forms in response to the trust. This feels backwards to the rational mind. The rational mind says, "How can I trust a path I cannot see?" But the law says, "The path cannot form while you withhold trust from a path you cannot see." The sequence must reverse. Trust precedes form. Faith precedes proof. The inner condition of aligned certainty is the condition under which new channels open, new contacts appear, new ideas arrive, and new forms of provision begin to move. The relief this teaching offers is not the relief of having a new plan. It is the relief of releasing the demand that the plan be visible before supply can begin moving. It is the relief of understanding that the absence of a visible path is not evidence against you. It is simply evidence that the next chapter of your provision will not arrive through the same visible channels that have now closed. And that is not a tragedy. That is the law working. Because the source is not limited to the channels that brought you to this point. The source is unlimited. The channels are limited, and when the limited channels close, the unlimited source does not close with them. This is the first relief. The second is this: you are not responsible for the root. You are responsible for the image, the faith, the gratitude, and the nearest action. The root is the source's responsibility, and the source has more intelligence about the root than your fear has. The source can see around corners the mind cannot see around. The source can organize the invisible before the visible has given any indication of movement. The source can prepare provision through channels that have not yet appeared on your horizon. You are not being abandoned because you cannot see the way. You are being invited into the only relationship through which the way will actually form. The man who wrote these teachings did not have an easy life. He did not write from comfort. He wrote from the same kind of pressure many of you are sitting in right now. The absence of a visible path was not foreign to him. It was his personal testing ground, and what he emerged with was not a formula for the comfortable and the prepared. It was a law for the desperate and the sincere, a law that operates precisely at the point where the visible world has run out of answers, a law that begins exactly where the path runs out. That is not a coincidence. That is the design. What Wattles ultimately taught was not a secret reserved for the privileged. It was a law available to anyone who was willing to meet the conditions. The conditions are not comfortable for the anxious mind. They require something the fear mind resists almost violently: the release of the demand for a visible guarantee before the inner alignment is established. But the law does not negotiate. It does not meet the fear halfway. It offers the trade exactly as it is. Release the demand for a visible path. Establish the inner image, the real faith, and the grateful action, and the source will move through channels you could not have planned with the small mind alone. There is an error that almost everyone in spiritual poverty makes, and it is almost invisible because it appears to be faith. The error is this: the person believes in the source, but requires the source to deliver through a visible, comprehensible, pre-approved channel. They are not opposed to divine supply. They simply need the divine supply to look like something they can already recognize. They need it to arrive in a form the mind can already process. They are open to a miracle, but the miracle must resemble a logical outcome. They will trust the source as long as the source agrees to use their plan. This is not trust. This is negotiation. And the source does not negotiate with the conditions the fear mind sets. The source responds to the actual inner condition. And the actual inner condition of someone who is managing their fear by insisting on a recognizable path is conditional alignment. I align with source as long as it moves through channels I can see. I hold the faith as long as there is some visible support for it. I release my grip on the plan when there is something concrete already forming. That condition is the receiving error, and it is the precise error that keeps people who genuinely believe in spiritual law from experiencing the provision the law would otherwise produce. Think about what you have been actually doing when you look at your life and see no path. You have been presenting the source with a demand. Show me the mechanism first. Give me the visible indication before I release the fear. Let me see at least one open door before I stop standing frozen at the closed ones. The demand is disguised as wisdom. But it is not wisdom. It is the finite mind trying to manage the source. It is the small intelligence trying to teach the infinite intelligence how to perform. And the source does not perform on command of the fearful mind. The source responds to the aligned mind. Wattles was precise about this. He described the relationship between the thinker and the source as a real, operative connection. The thinker who is in the certain way is not asking the source to deliver something from a safe emotional distance. The thinker is in relationship with the source, and in that relationship, the mental image is not a wish. It is an impression into the formless substance. The faith is not a feeling. It is the operative condition of alignment. The gratitude is not a technique. It is a genuine acknowledgement that supply is already moving. These are not performances. They are real inner states. And when they are real, the source responds to them as real. When they are managed from behind a wall of fear, the source receives the fear as the actual signal. Here is the error stated plainly. You have been trying to make the source operate through the visible channels your finite mind has identified. You have been looking at your bank account, your employer, your clients, your family, your skills, your market, and you have been telling the source, the path must come through one of these. And when none of these channels has produced what you need, you have concluded that the source has not answered. But the source may be answering through a channel that is not yet on your map. And the reason that channel has not yet reached you is not that the source is withholding. It is that your attention is so locked on the channels you have already identified that you are not open to receiving through any form you have not yet anticipated. Demanding a visible path is not the same as planning wisely. Planning wisely means identifying the most logical next step and taking it. Demanding a visible path means refusing to move in faith until the complete route from here to the destination has been made visible to the current mind. These are entirely different operations. One involves walking the next step with clarity. The other involves standing still until every future step has been pre-confirmed. Wattles' certain way requires the first. The fearful mind defaults to the second, and the second can occupy a person for a lifetime without ever producing movement. What has to be confronted directly is this: there is a part of you that has been more committed to the reality of the closed door than to the reality of the source that sits behind all doors. You have given more mental time to calculating the obstacles than to holding the image of the life. You have rehearsed the limitations more fluently than you have held the vision. You have studied the absence of a path more thoroughly than you have trusted the presence of the source. That imbalance is not a character flaw, it is a conditioned response, but conditioned responses can be changed when they are clearly seen. And this one must be clearly seen before the law can begin to operate differently in your life. The error does not live in your desire. Your desire is aligned with the nature of source. The error does not live in your need. Your need is not a spiritual failing. The error lives in the specific demand you make of the source before you will release your fear. The demand that the path be visible. The demand that the method be comprehensible. The demand that the channel be familiar. That demand is the one invisible block that keeps the vast, responsive, intelligent, formless supply from reaching you in the new form it is preparing. And the first step of the certain way is not to find a new plan. It is to release that demand. You have trusted the visible channels more than you have trusted the source behind them. When the job provided, you felt secure, and you attributed that security to the job. When the job stopped providing, you felt abandoned, and you attributed that abandonment to the source. But the job was never the source. The job was a channel, and the source did not leave when the job changed. The source was not in the job. The source was in relation to your aligned thinking, and it was moving supply through the job as the available channel at that time. When the channel closed, the supply did not stop. The channel closed. The supply is still moving, looking for the next available form. The question is whether your inner condition is now creating the conditions for a new channel to form. Wattles did not ask people to deny the reality of closed doors. He asked people to refuse the interpretation that closed doors are proof of closed supply. The door closes. That is real. But the source does not close. That is also real. And the teaching is not that you pretend the door is open when it is not. The teaching is that you refuse to let the closed door become the governing report on what is possible. Because the source is not the door. The source is the intelligence that can open a new door in a wall you have not yet looked at. And it begins doing exactly that the moment the inner condition shifts from demanding the old path to trusting the new one that is forming. There is one more layer to this error that must be named. It is the layer of self-will. The person in financial fear is often not just afraid of poverty. They are afraid of being surprised by the form of provision. They want the supply, but they want it on terms they have pre-approved. They want the amount, but they want it through the channel they have identified. They want the freedom, but they want to arrive at it by the route they have already mapped. And when the source moves supply through a form that was not on the pre-approved list, through an unexpected person, through an unusual offer, through a channel that does not look prestigious or predictable, the fear mind rejects it. Not because it is wrong, but because it does not match the expected form. That rejection of unexpected supply is the final and most costly expression of the invisible error. The reason this error persists in spiritually sincere people is that it does not feel like an error. It feels like responsibility. It feels like discernment. It feels like the voice of a mature adult who has learned from experience not to get ahead of the evidence. And this is exactly why the error is so persistent. Because the mind that produced the error is also the mind interpreting the error. And from inside the fear mind, the demand for a visible path does not look like distrust. It looks like the only intelligent response to a difficult situation. Fear has learned to use the language of wisdom. It uses numbers. It says, look at the arithmetic. The income is this, the expenses are that, the gap is real, and no path has appeared in a long time. This is not fantasy. This is the actual situation. And isn't it responsible to face the actual situation? This is what fear sounds like when it has put on the clothes of wisdom. It invokes data. It cites precedent. It refers to past failures. It uses the vocabulary of realism, practicality, and caution. And because these words are associated in the culture with intelligence and responsibility, the mind that uses them feels justified. It feels more spiritually mature than the people who are simply believing without evidence. Wattles addressed this directly, though not harshly. He understood that the person who has been through real financial hardship develops real intellectual armor against what they perceive as naive optimism. The mind says, I have been disappointed before. I have trusted before and been let down. I have believed in a path that did not appear. I have invested in a direction that failed. And so the caution I now carry is not irrational fear. It is the accumulated wisdom of someone who has tested hope against reality and found that hope alone is not sufficient. This is not foolishness. This is experience speaking. The problem is that experience is speaking from the old pattern, and the old pattern cannot produce the new life. What Wattles was not saying is that you should ignore evidence. He was saying that you should identify which kind of evidence you are placing at the center of your navigation. If the visible evidence of the present moment is the primary guide, then the mind is being governed by the limit. The limit is real in the visible world, but the visible world is not the complete report on what is possible. The invisible source, which is not visible in the present evidence, is also real, and it is, according to the law, more fundamental than the visible channel, because the channel came from the source, not the other way around. So when there is a conflict between what the visible evidence reports and what the inner relationship with source suggests, Wattles would say that the inner relationship is the more reliable navigator. This does not mean that the person abandons logic entirely. It means the person shifts the primary relationship from the visible channel to the invisible source. Logic still operates. Action still occurs. The bills are still real. The obligations are still real. The practical steps must still be taken. But the anxiety that drives the calculation, the fear that the visible arithmetic is the final truth, that anxiety must be released, because the anxiety is not adding accuracy to the calculation, it is adding distortion. It is narrowing the field of available action. It is closing the mind to forms of supply it might otherwise recognize, and it is sending into the formless substance the precise signal of fear and limitation that returns to the thinker as more limitation. The belief that caution equals wisdom is perhaps the most elegant trap the fear mind has ever constructed. Because caution is sometimes genuinely wise, there are real situations where careful discernment prevents harm, and so the mind has learned to apply the language and the feeling of genuine wisdom to situations where what is actually happening is not wisdom, but spiritual contraction. The question is not, am I being cautious? The question is, am I being cautious from a place of inner alignment, taking the next right step while trusting the source for the larger movement? Or am I being cautious as a way of not moving at all, because movement without a guaranteed visible path feels too frightening? There is a related error that lives beneath the demand for a visible path. It is the belief that patience is the same as inaction. The person says, I am not forcing, I am being patient, but patience in the certain way is active. It holds the image, it maintains the faith, it gives daily gratitude, it takes the nearest right action, it remains open to unexpected channels. Patience in the certain way is an inner discipline, not an outer stillness. The patience that is actually fear-wearing quiet clothes is different. It holds back from action. It waits for certainty before moving. It says, I will act when I can see more of the path, and that kind is not the patience of the certain way. It is the paralysis of fear with a spiritual name. The confrontation between fear disguised as wisdom and genuine spiritual intelligence often comes down to one question. Where is your primary certainty anchored? Is your certainty anchored in the visible evidence of the present moment? Or is your certainty anchored in the unchanging nature of the source and its relationship to your aligned inner condition? If it is anchored in the visible evidence, then every time the visible evidence changes for the worse, your certainty collapses. Your faith rises and falls with the bank account. Your belief in supply depends on the behavior of visible channels, and this means you are not actually operating in faith. You are operating in circumstance-dependent hope, which is an entirely different thing. Genuine faith, in the way Wattles described it, does not require visible confirmation before it operates. It is an inner certainty that the source is responsive and intelligent and already moving in the direction of your aligned desire. This certainty is not earned by having a guaranteed plan. It is established by a changed inner relationship. And the changed inner relationship does not wait for circumstance to change first. It precedes the change. It creates the condition for the change. It is not the result of better circumstances. It is the cause of better circumstances. This is the humility the teaching requires, not the humility of self-abasement, not the humility of saying you are not worthy to receive, but the humility of the mind that says, my small intelligence cannot see all the ways the source can move. I cannot predict the channel. I cannot design the route. I cannot identify in advance every form through which supply may come. My job is to hold the image, maintain the faith, act on what is nearest and right, and remain genuinely open to provision in a form I have not yet imagined. That is the humility that unlocks the law, and it is the humility that fear disguised as wisdom will fight hardest to prevent. When Wattles described the mechanism of provision, he was not describing a fantasy process. He was describing a real sequence of cause and effect that operates through the inner life of the thinker and expresses itself through the outer movement of circumstance. The mechanism is not magic, though it may feel like magic to the mind that has only experienced provision through the limited channels of the visible world. The mechanism is a law. Like all laws, it operates consistently and impersonally when the conditions are met. The question for the viewer right now is not whether the law operates. The question is whether the inner conditions that activate the law have been established. The first element of the mechanism is the clear, definite, held mental image of the desired life. Not a vague wish, not an anxious hope. A clear image, specific enough to feel real, held with enough consistency that it becomes the dominant mental impression. Wattles was very specific that the image must be held with purpose, not held with desperation. There is a difference between the mind that grips an image in fear and the mind that holds an image in faith. The fearful grip communicates scarcity to the formless substance. The faithful hold communicates expectation of abundance. The source responds to the communication as it actually is, not as you intend it to be. The second element is genuine gratitude, not performed gratitude, not the forced recitation of what you have in order to feel better. Genuine gratitude is a real inner acknowledgement that the source is already expressing life through every channel that is currently available to you. The air, the body, the relationships, the partial provision that exists even in the middle of scarcity. When you genuinely feel grateful for what is already flowing, You are establishing an inner alignment with abundance that is prior to the new abundance you are seeking. You are telling the source in real inner terms that you already understand the nature of supply. And that understanding is itself a form of alignment. The third element is real faith, not the declared faith that sits on top of fear. Real faith is the inner condition in which you genuinely expect supply to come. You genuinely believe that the source is responsive and intelligent and already moving, and you are genuinely not in the grip of the anxious demand for a visible confirmation before you will release your fear. Real faith is not the absence of doubt. It is the condition in which doubt has not been given the governing position. The faithful mind may still notice the visible evidence of lack, but it does not appoint that evidence as the final authority. The final authority in the mind of faith is the relationship with Source. The fourth element is action. And this is where Wattles' teaching is most often misunderstood. The action in the certain way is not desperate, anxious action applied to every possible visible channel in the hope that one will break open. The action in the certain way is calm, purposeful, daily action taken on whatever is present and right, guided by the impression of the inner image. You do not force every door. You walk through the doors that are open. You take the step that is in front of you, not the step that is 3 miles ahead. You do not require the visible path to be complete before you begin moving. You move on the step that is nearest, trusting that the source is organizing the steps you cannot yet see. Now here is where the mechanism becomes something the analytical mind struggles to accept. The source does not move supply only through the channels the viewer has already identified as the most likely routes. The source moves through the full range of what is possible, which includes people the viewer has not yet met, ideas the viewer has not yet had, opportunities that have not yet arrived in visible form, timing that cannot yet be calculated, and forms of provision that the current mind would not have thought to request. This means that the mechanism includes the real possibility that the supply arrives in a form that surprises you, through an unexpected conversation, through a door in a wall you had stopped looking at, through a reversal of something that appeared to be permanent. The mechanism also operates through the changed perception of the aligned thinker. When you are in the grip of fear, your perceptual field narrows. You see threats more readily than opportunities. You interpret ambiguous situations through the lens of past failure. You reject or overlook possibilities that do not fit the shape of what you expect. But when the inner condition shifts toward genuine faith and clear image, the perceptual field opens. You begin to notice things you would have filtered out before. A conversation that would have seemed unrelated now strikes you as potentially significant. An idea that would have been dismissed as unlikely now feels worth exploring. The mechanism is partly in the outer world organizing itself, and it is partly in you becoming able to perceive what was always there, but invisible to the contracted, fearful mind. Wattles spoke about acting with full faith on the present activity as a core practice. Whatever you are doing in the present, do it with the excellence, the intention, and the full engagement of someone who believes that the source is using this very action as part of the route. Not because every present action is itself the path to wealth, but because the person who does every present thing with full faith and intention is a different kind of thinker than the person who does everything half-heartedly while waiting for the real path to appear. And the different thinker creates a different signal in the formless substance. The signal that says, I am here, I am fully engaged, I am trusting the source, and I am ready for the next step. The mechanism includes what could be called the organizing intelligence of the source. Because the formless substance is, in Wattles' framework, a thinking substance, it has an organizing capacity that exceeds what the human mind can replicate. It can arrange timing across multiple lives, multiple circumstances, multiple locations, in a way that produces a convergence the viewer could not have planned alone. The right person arrives at the right moment. The right idea appears at the right time. The right door opens when the viewer has taken the right inner step. This is not described as supernatural interruption of the natural order. It is described as the natural operation of an intelligent law that organizes form in response to impressed thought. Fear disrupts this mechanism in a very specific way. Fear sends a signal into the formless substance that is not the image of the desired life. Fear sends the image of the feared life. Fear rehearses the scenario of not having enough, of the path not coming, of the door remaining closed, of the future remaining as limited as the present. And because the formless substance is responsive to the impressions it receives, the fearful mind is, in effect, impressing into the substance the very conditions it is afraid of. This is not a moral punishment, it is a mechanical consequence. The thinker holds the dominant mental image of lack, and the formless substance organizes the visible world in response to that dominant image. This is why Wattles placed such emphasis on guarding the mental image against fear. Not because fear is a moral failing, but because fear is a competing signal that interrupts the alignment. Every time the fear mind returns and impresses its image of no path and no way, it is interrupting the image of the desired life. And the formless substance, responsive to both signals, organizes in the direction of the dominant one. This is the mechanical explanation for why the practice must be daily, why the image must be held consistently, and why the moments of panic and despair are not just emotionally uncomfortable, but functionally disruptive to the very mechanism that is producing the new life. The mechanism does not require the viewer to be perfect. It does not require that fear never arises. It requires that the image of the desired life be held more consistently, more dominantly, more genuinely than the image of the feared condition. And it requires that when fear arises, it is not given the governing position. It is noticed, it is not fed, and the mind returns to the image. That return, practiced consistently, is what Wattles called holding the image. Not a single moment of perfect clarity, but a consistent practice of returning to the image when the mind drifts toward fear. That practice, maintained daily, with faith and gratitude and nearest action, is the complete mechanism. The implication for the person with no visible path is direct and important. The mechanism does not require a visible path before it begins. It requires the inner conditions of clear image, real faith, genuine gratitude, and nearest action. Those inner conditions can be established right now in the absence of any visible path. In fact, establishing them in the absence of a visible path is the precise demonstration of faith that activates the law at its deepest level. Anyone can hold faith when the path is visible. The law, in its deepest expression, is activated by the person who holds faith in the presence of no visible path. That is the test, and that is the mechanism. The movement from invisible impression to visible circumstance is not instantaneous in most cases, and the person who is expecting immediate transformation will often conclude in the space between impression and manifestation that the law has not worked, but the law is working. What the viewer cannot see in the space of waiting is the organizational intelligence of the source arranging the elements that will eventually converge as the new circumstance. The timing belongs to the source. The inner condition belongs to the thinker. When both are aligned, the convergence is inevitable. But the timing is not subject to the thinker's impatience. How does the invisible actually become visible? Through changed perception that notices different things. Through a conversation that opens a door the viewer had not thought to knock on. Through an idea that arrives, often quietly, in a moment of stillness that represents a direction the fearful mind would have dismissed. Through a person who was already in the viewer's life, but is now seen differently. Through an offer that arrives from an unexpected source. Through a delay that turned out to be a repositioning. Through a closure that forced a turn toward something better. The invisible becomes visible through ordinary channels. But they are channels the viewer would have missed, filtered out, or rejected if the inner condition had not shifted. Consider the person who is deeply afraid that a specific job or income source is the only possible channel through which their financial life can stabilize. They pour all their attention and anxiety into that one visible channel. They become so focused on it, so desperate for it to deliver, that they lose the broad perceptual openness that would allow them to notice other possibilities. An opportunity arrives through a contact in a different field. A conversation happens at a moment they were not expecting anything. An idea occurs to them that represents an entirely different direction. But because the mind is locked in anxious calculation around the one channel, these other movements go unnoticed or are dismissed as distractions from the real path. The source was moving, The thinker was not open to receive the form of the movement. The inner shift that Wattles prescribed is therefore not just a spiritual comfort, it is a practical opening of the perceptual channel. When the inner condition moves from anxious attachment to one visible channel toward a trusting openness to the full intelligence of the source, the mind literally begins to function differently. The filtering system changes. The things that are noticed change. The responses to conversation, idea, and opportunity change. And because the outer world is sending signals constantly, what changes is not the outer world, but the thinker's capacity to receive from it. The supply was moving. The reception was blocked. The inner shift unblocks the reception. New channels often form from actions that appear to have nothing to do with the financial goal. A person who begins practicing genuine gratitude in the morning finds that their relationships become warmer. Those warmer relationships open into conversations that were not available from behind the wall of fear. Those conversations reveal information or connections that represent a new direction. A person who begins taking the nearest right action, even when that action seems small and unrelated to the financial goal, finds that the quality of their engagement changes. People notice. Situations respond. Doors that were not in the original plan begin to open. This is not mysticism. This is the natural consequence of a changed inner condition expressing itself through changed outer behavior. There is a specific kind of provision that comes through what Wattles would describe as the organization of the formless substance across time. An event that happened 2 years ago, which at the time seemed like a failure or a wrong turn, turns out to have positioned the viewer exactly where they needed to be for a current opportunity. A contact that was made years ago under circumstances that seemed unrelated is now the exact person who holds a key. A skill that was developed in a context that appeared to have closed is now precisely the skill that a new situation requires. The source is working in time, across a field wider than the viewer can see, organizing elements that the viewer cannot track. The closed door 2 years ago may have been the beginning of the path the viewer is about to step onto. This means that the test of the viewer's inner alignment is not only whether they hold the image in moments of stillness, it is also whether they hold it when past events are reinterpreted by fear. When the mind says, "That failure 3 years ago proves the path will not come," the aligned thinker is able to say, "That event was a channel closing so that a new one could form. I do not know yet what it was preparing, but I trust the source more than I trust my fear's interpretation of the past." This reinterpretation of the past is not denial. It is the refusal to let the fearful interpretation of old events become the governing story about the present possibility. There is also a mechanism at work in the quality of action. Wattles described the importance of giving more in use value than you receive in financial value in every transaction and interaction. Not as a sacrifice, but as a genuine expression of the inner abundance that the aligned thinker carries. The person who performs their present work with full faith and full investment, offering more in quality and presence than is technically required, creates a different impression on the people and systems around them. This impression, this signature of genuine engagement, is itself a form of communication that the source moves through. People trust and invest in the person who gives genuine value. Opportunity gravitates toward genuine quality. The mechanism works through the character of the thinker, as expressed in daily action. Timing is one of the mechanisms the viewer must learn to trust without controlling. There are situations where a door has not yet opened because the full preparation is not yet in place on the source's side. The person who will introduce the viewer to the right contact has not yet arrived in the viewer's life. The idea that will open the new direction has not yet been impressed into the viewer's mind. The shift in external circumstances that will create the need for the viewer's specific contribution has not yet occurred. And during that preparation period, the viewer's inner condition is everything. Because the viewer who remains in faith, holding the image, taking the nearest action, staying genuinely grateful, is maintaining the alignment that the source can move through the moment the preparation converges. The viewer who collapses into fear in that period may not be in a receiving condition when the convergence arrives. The transition from invisible to visible often passes through a phase that looks like nothing is happening. This is the most difficult phase, and it is the phase in which most people abandon the practice and conclude the law does not work. But this phase, in Wattles' teaching, is often the phase of deepest, invisible preparation. The formless substance is organizing. The elements are being arranged. The contacts are moving toward the thinker. The ideas are forming. The timing is being prepared. And none of this is visible to the external eye of the viewer in the waiting period. The only visible evidence available during this phase is the changed inner condition of the thinker. Less panic, more stillness, more genuine action, more openness. And that changed inner condition is itself the most real evidence that the mechanism is working. The viewer must also understand that new channels do not always arrive with labels. A new channel may arrive as an unexpected phone call from someone you had not spoken to in years. It may arrive as an idea during a walk. It may arrive as a conversation that turns in an unexpected direction. It may arrive as a reversal of something you had given up on. It may arrive as a need expressed by someone close to you that, when met, opens a direction you had not considered. The new channel will not announce itself as the answer. It will arrive as a quiet opportunity, available to the person whose inner life is open and whose perceptual field has been cleared of the anxious fixation on the one expected form. What Wattles was ultimately describing in the mechanism is the precise way in which the formless substance expresses itself through the visible world in response to the impressions of the aligned thinker. The expression takes the path of least resistance. It moves through the available openings. It organizes through the connections that exist. It arrives in the forms that the present state of the visible world can accommodate, even if those forms were not on the viewer's pre-approved list. The mechanism is real. It is consistent. It is intelligent. It does not fail when the conditions are genuinely met. And the central condition that it requires is the inner certainty of the thinker, that the source is already moving, even when the visible world has not yet shown the form. Every person who has ever experienced the sudden arrival of provision they could not have predicted has experienced this mechanism. Looking back, they can often trace the invisible connections that organized themselves before the visible result appeared. The conversation that happened months earlier, the decision that was made despite the fear, the door that was walked through even though it did not look like the expected path, the old contact that re-emerged at the precise moment. All of these are the source operating through the full range of the possible, guided by the aligned impression of the faithful thinker, arriving in a form that could not have been planned by the finite mind alone. Everything in Wattles' teaching leads to a single inner movement, not a dramatic outer event, not the sudden appearance of money, a shift in the fundamental posture of the mind toward the source. The shift is this: from the position of one who requires proof before trust to the position of one who trusts before proof. It sounds simple. In practice, it is one of the most demanding inner disciplines a person can undertake, because the shift must occur not just in declared belief, but in the actual operating condition of the mind. Not just in what you say when you are calm, but in what your mind defaults to when the pressure is real. The new position is not, "I will trust when I see some evidence." The new position is, "I trust the source before I see the path." Read that again. Not after, before. The trust precedes the visible path. This reversal is the entire law stated in its simplest form. And everything in the practice of the certain way is in service of establishing this reversal as the actual governing condition of the inner life. Not just an idea you agree with intellectually, but the real inner position from which you navigate every day, every calculation, every closed door, every moment of financial pressure. This shift requires something that the fear mind will resist with great sophistication. It requires you to stop treating uncertainty as rejection. The fear mind says, "If the source were truly with me, I would know the path." The absence of a visible path is therefore evidence that the source is not responding. That interpretation is the single greatest obstacle to the shift, because the interpretation makes the inner condition conditional on the visible evidence. And as long as the inner condition is conditional on the visible evidence, it remains a condition the fear mind controls. The shift breaks that conditionality. It says, the absence of a visible path means only that the path is not yet visible. It does not mean the source has not begun. It means I cannot yet see what the source is already doing. The person who has made this shift relates to closed doors differently. They still notice the closed door. They still feel the pressure of the absence, but they do not appoint the closed door as the final statement on their future. They hold the image of the desired life alongside the visible closed door. They maintain faith in the source alongside the visible absence of a path. They take the nearest right action alongside the visible uncertainty about where it will lead. This is not pretending the door is open. It is refusing to let the closed door govern the inner condition. There is a specific kind of internal release that accompanies the genuine shift. It is not the release of responsibility. It is not the abandonment of care or effort. It is the release of the requirement that the source operate according to your timeline, through your pre-identified channels, in the form you have pre-approved. That release, when it is genuine, creates an inner spaciousness that the contracted fear mind never has. And in that spaciousness, the perceptual field opens. New thoughts become available. New directions appear worth exploring. The mind, freed from the grip of the demand for a specific visible path, becomes genuinely available to receive from the full range of what the source can move. The shift also changes the relationship with action. The fear mind takes action as a form of forcing, desperately pushing every visible option in the hope that enough pressure will produce a result. The aligned mind takes action as a form of participation in what the source is already organizing. The action is taken faithfully, not frantically. It is taken on the nearest available right thing, not on every possible thing simultaneously. It is taken with the quality and presence of someone who believes the source is already moving, and that different quality of action produces a different quality of result, not because positive thinking causes magic, but because genuine, faithful action is simply better action. And better action produces better outcomes. The shift must extend into speech. Wattles was clear that the thinker should not speak doubt over their own future, not because words are magic spells, but because the words you speak are evidence of the inner condition, and the inner condition you are cultivating must be reflected in the language you use about your life. When you speak as someone who expects provision, you are reinforcing the inner condition of expectation. When you speak as someone who fears the path will not come, you are reinforcing the inner condition of fear. The language is not the cause, but it is a reflection and reinforcement of the cause, and learning to speak your future from the aligned position rather than the fearful one is part of the daily practice of the certain way. What the shift does not require is the elimination of all visible difficulty. The bills are still real. The gap is still real. The uncertainty is still real. The shift does not change these visible facts. What it changes is the inner position from which you navigate them, and it is the inner position that determines what the formless substance receives as the governing impression. The bills can be present and real, and the inner condition can still be one of genuine trust in the source. The gap can be visible, and the mind can still hold the image of the life that is forming beyond the gap. The uncertainty can be real, and faith can still be the governing intelligence. The shift is not the disappearance of difficulty. It is the refusal to let difficulty be the governing truth. This is the shift that Wattles spent his whole writing life trying to communicate. Not a technique, not a formula, a genuine inner reversal from trusting the visible channels to trusting the invisible source behind all channels. From requiring a plan before releasing fear to releasing fear before the plan arrives. From believing that no visible path means no future to understanding that no visible path means the source is preparing the next form of supply through channels the finite mind cannot yet see. That shift, when it is genuine, is the beginning of the certain way, and the certain way, faithfully held, produces the result. Not as a promise of a specific amount on a specific date, but as a law that organizes visible form in response to the aligned, trusting, grateful, actively engaged thinker. The shift may happen in a single moment of genuine release, or it may be the accumulated result of daily practice over time, each day returning to the image, each day releasing the demand, each day acting faithfully on what is nearest and right, each day noticing the fear, but refusing to give it the governing position, until the inner condition is genuinely and consistently more trust than fear. Both are valid paths to the same destination, and neither requires the visible path to be present before it begins. The practice Wattles prescribed is not a complicated ceremony. It is a daily inner alignment that takes form in 3 movements: name the desire, release the visible method, act on the nearest right thing. These 3 movements, practiced each day with genuine intention, constitute the practical expression of the certain way. They are not magic incantations. They are the disciplined inner actions of a mind that is maintaining its relationship with the formless source and expressing that relationship through daily engagement with the visible world. The first movement is to name the desire clearly. Every morning, in whatever quiet moment is available to you, name the specific life you are moving toward. Not a vague wish for things to be better, a clear, definite image, a specific picture of the provision, the freedom, the peace, the capacity you desire. Name it not with desperation, but with the calm certainty of someone who knows it is already being organized by the source. The image does not need to include the method. It includes the destination. You hold the destination clearly. You feel the reality of it as if it were already taking form, and you express genuine gratitude that the source is already moving toward it on your behalf. The second movement is to release the visible method. This is the deliberate act of releasing the demand that the supply come through a specific, pre-identified channel. You say, internally and if possible aloud, that you release the requirement that you already know the how. You release the demand that the path be visible before you trust the source. You acknowledge that the source has more intelligence about the route than your fear does, and you deliberately move the mind away from the anxious calculation of how this will happen and back to the clear image of the desired life. This release is not performed once and complete. It may need to be performed many times in a single day. Every time the fear returns with its demand for a visible path, the release is practiced again. The third movement is to act on the nearest right thing. Look at the present moment. What is in front of you that represents a right, faithful, quality engagement with life as it currently is? It may be doing your present work with full presence and excellence. It may be making a phone call you have been postponing. It may be having a conversation with genuine openness. It may be taking a single step in a direction that feels aligned, even if you cannot yet see where it leads. It may be attending to a relationship that deserves your full attention. Whatever it is, do it with the quality and intention of someone who believes the source is using this very action as part of the organizing movement toward the desired life. These 3 movements do not take hours. They take minutes in the morning and an ongoing inner discipline throughout the day. The morning practice establishes the day's governing inner condition. The ongoing discipline maintains it against the interruption of fear. Every time the mind returns to anxious calculation of the missing path, the practice returns it to the image, the release, and the nearest right action. Not once, not twice, as many times as the fear arises. Because the law is not asking for perfection. It is asking for the consistent return to alignment whenever the mind drifts away from it. Gratitude must be woven through the entire daily practice, not gratitude as a performance of contentment with a difficult situation. Real gratitude for what is already being expressed by the source through the channels currently available. The health, the capacity to think, the relationships that offer support, the partial provision that exists even in scarcity. Real gratitude for these is not denial of the need for more. It is acknowledgement that the source is already expressing life through you in the forms that are currently available, and that acknowledgement is itself a form of alignment with abundance. The mind that is genuinely grateful for what already flows is a mind that is already in the receiving position. There is a practice specifically around the closed doors and the visible evidence of no path. When the fear arises and presents its case, naming the closed doors and the absent supply, the practice is to hear it without giving it the governing position. You do not deny what the fear is pointing to. The closed door is real. The absent path is real. But you deliberately, consciously choose the inner position that says, this is the present visible report, and it is not the complete truth. The complete truth includes the source, which is already moving in the invisible, preparing a form of supply I cannot yet see. I hold the image. I release the demand for the visible path. I act on what is nearest and right. and I trust the source before I see the path. The practice also includes what could be called faithful receiving posture. This is the inner orientation of someone who is genuinely open to provision in unexpected forms. When an opportunity arrives that does not match the expected form, the practice is to pause before rejecting it. To ask, is this a door being opened? Not every unexpected offer is the source's movement, but the mind in the certain way is not automatically closed to the unexpected. It evaluates with genuine openness rather than with the defensive filtering of the fear mind. This openness, practiced daily, is what allows the new channels to be recognized when they arrive. End each day with a brief, genuine return to the image and a release of the anxiety of the day. Not to deny what the day has been, but to refuse to let the fear of the day be the final impression before sleep, because the impressions held in the mind as sleep approaches have a particular depth and consistency. Wattles did not prescribe this exactly in these terms, but the principle is present in the teaching. The last dominant impression of the mind before sleep is a real signal into the formless substance, and the person in the certain way learns to use that moment with intention, releasing the fear voice that recounts the day's failures and returning to the image of the forming life and the gratitude for the source that is already moving. The practice is not glamorous. It is not dramatic. It is a discipline. And disciplines are maintained not through single moments of inspiration, but through daily repetition. The discipline of the certain way is the discipline of returning every day, sometimes many times a day, to the image, the release, and the nearest action. Of guarding the inner condition against the re-entry of fear as the governing intelligence. Of speaking about the future from faith rather than from fear. Of treating every day's action as a participation in what the source is already organizing. This daily practice, held consistently over time, is the vehicle through which the formless substance expresses the desired life in visible form. There will be a period. Perhaps it has already begun. Perhaps it has been going on for longer than you expected. The period when you are practicing, when you are holding the image, when you are releasing the demand for the visible path, when you are taking the nearest right action, when you are expressing gratitude each morning, and the visible world has not moved, the account is the same, the bills have not decreased, the job has not changed, the unexpected call has not come, the new door has not appeared, and the fear mind, which has been watching all of this with patient skepticism, says, "See, I told you, nothing is happening. This period is the test, and it is the most important period in the entire journey of the certain way. Because what the fear mind does not and cannot see is that this is the period of invisible preparation. The formless substance is organizing. The contacts are moving. The timing is being arranged. The elements that will converge as the new visible circumstance are being positioned, and none of this is visible from the outside. The only visible evidence available during this period is the changed inner condition of the thinker. And the changed inner condition is not nothing. It is, in fact, the primary evidence that the mechanism is operating. But the old mind does not accept inner evidence as sufficient. It wants visible proof, it wants numbers to change, it wants doors to open, it wants something it can point to as confirmation that the law is working. And in the absence of that visible confirmation, the old mind begins to construct the argument for returning to its former position. It says, the faith has been maintained for a period and nothing has happened. This is evidence that the faith is misplaced. The responsible thing to do is to return to the realistic assessment of the situation. And that realistic assessment, the old mind says, includes the acknowledgement that the source has not responded, that the path is not coming. Do not let that argument govern you. The argument sounds reasonable, it sounds like wisdom. It is the same fear dressed in the same language of practicality it always wears, and the response to it is not to argue with it or silence it. The response is to continue the practice, to hold the image, to release the demand, to act on the nearest right thing, to maintain genuine gratitude, not because the visible evidence has confirmed the law, but because the law does not require visible confirmation before the thinker's inner condition to operate. The law requires the thinker's inner condition to be genuine before the visible confirmation can arrive. The sequence cannot be reversed to satisfy the fear. The old mind will do more than argue. It will attempt to pull you back into the old pattern of anxious calculation, the old pattern of searching every visible channel for the path, the old pattern of rehearsing the worst possible outcomes in the hope that preparing for the worst will somehow protect against it, the old pattern of speaking the absence over your own future, the old pattern of waking up in the grip of the old fear and letting that fear govern the day. The old pattern feels familiar. It feels like home, even though it is the home that produced the suffering you are trying to leave. And in moments of extended waiting, when the visible world has not yet shown movement, the old pattern feels more honest than the new inner condition. This is the precise test. Will you maintain the practice when the visible world is offering no confirmation? Will you hold the image when the evidence of its absence is louder than any voice of faith? Will you continue to release the demand for the visible path even when the invisible path has not yet produced a single visible sign? Will you take the nearest right action even when that action does not appear to be leading anywhere in the visible field? Will you continue to speak faith over your own future when the visible arithmetic says the future is unchanged? The answer to those questions, held consistently over the period of waiting, is the definition of the faith the law requires. What makes this test genuinely difficult is that it arrives alongside real consequences. This is not an abstract spiritual test conducted in comfortable conditions. The bills are real, the account is real, the obligations have real deadlines. The pressure of the visible world during the waiting period is not theoretical, and the person who is trying to maintain the inner condition of the certain way while facing the practical weight of real financial pressure is not doing an easy thing. It is one of the most demanding inner disciplines available, which is why Wattles did not describe it casually. He described it as a way, a certain way, a way that requires consistent, deliberate, daily practice in the face of the full pressure of the visible world. What the test is measuring is not your perfection. It is not whether you have maintained the inner condition without a single moment of fear or doubt. It is measuring whether, when fear arises and the old mind makes its case, you return to the practice. Whether you consistently choose again and again to hold the image rather than the fear. Whether you return to faith after the panic. Whether you release the demand again after the old mind has made its argument. The consistency of the return, not the absence of the departure, is what the test is measuring. And every return, no matter how many times the fear has pulled you away, is a genuine act of alignment with the law. There will be moments during the waiting period when the physical conditions of the visible world become acutely pressing. When an unexpected expense arrives, when a planned source of income is delayed, when a door that seemed to be opening closes instead. These moments are the hardest tests of the inner condition. They are the moments when the old mind makes its most powerful argument. See, the situation is worsening, not improving. This is proof that the law is not working. These moments require not just a continued holding of the image, but a specific inner act of reinterpretation. Not denial of the difficulty, but a refusal to appoint the new difficulty as the final word on the direction of the movement. Wattles was clear that the thinker in the certain way could face real setbacks in the visible world. Channels could still close, plans could still fail, timing could still surprise with delays. These visible events do not disconfirm the law. They are part of the movement of the source through the full complexity of the visible world. A closed channel may be the repositioning that creates the space for a better channel. A delay may be the timing, organizing for a better convergence. A visible setback may be the final resistance of the old condition before the new one fully takes hold. The thinker in the certain way learns to hold the image through these events, not because the events are pleasant, but because the events are not the final report. The source is the final report. The waiting period will not last indefinitely. This is not a promise of a specific timeline. It is a statement of the law. The law moves. The invisible is always pressing toward visible expression. The formless substance is always organizing in the direction of the aligned impression. The period of no visible change is not a permanent condition. It is a phase. a phase that ends when the invisible preparation has reached the point where the visible world can accommodate the convergence. And the thinker's job during this phase is not to manufacture visible evidence. It is to hold the inner condition that allows the convergence to be received when it arrives. When people first encounter the teaching of the certain way, they look for external signs that the law is working. They watch for changes in the bank account, for unexpected checks, for job offers, for news that suggests a breakthrough is forming. And while external signs do eventually appear when the law is genuinely operating, they are not the first signs. The first signs are internal, and they are more significant than most people realize because they are the evidence of the actual mechanism operating. The external signs are effects. The internal signs are the cause made visible. The first internal sign is a reduction in panic, not the complete elimination of fear, but a specific change in the quality of the fear response. Where before a single piece of bad financial news would send the entire inner life into a spiral of catastrophic thinking, the thinker who has genuinely shifted notices something different. The fear arises, but it does not immediately become catastrophic. The mind still notices the difficulty, but it does not immediately construct the worst possible outcome and appoint it as the inevitable future. The panic is less automatic, less total, less governing. And this change, though it may seem small, is a real indication that the inner condition has shifted from fear as the primary orientation to faith as a genuine competing intelligence. The second internal sign is less forcing. The person who has been in the certain way for a period begins to notice that they are no longer pushing every visible channel with desperate energy. They are still taking action, they are still engaged, but the quality of the action has changed. It is less frantic. It is more purposeful. It is chosen rather than driven. The viewer who notices that they have stopped making desperate phone calls, stopped sending anxious messages, stopped attempting to force outcomes through visible pressure, and has begun instead to take one faithful step at a time with genuine presence, is looking at a real sign of inner change. The third internal sign is a different relationship with closed doors. The person who has been practicing the inner shift begins to notice that a closed door no longer feels like a personal verdict. It feels like information. It feels like a redirect. It feels like the source saying, not this channel, but not nowhere. The emotional response to rejection, to delay, to disappointment, while still present, has a different texture. It does not collapse the entire inner condition. It does not immediately call up the familiar story of permanent failure. It is felt, and then with increasing consistency it is released, and the mind returns to the image and the trust and the nearest action. That different relationship with closed doors is a very real sign. The fourth internal sign is increasing openness to unexpected forms of provision. The person who is operating from behind the wall of fear is closed to unexpected forms. They want the supply in the form they have already imagined. But the person who is genuinely shifting into trust finds, often to their own surprise, that they are considering directions they would have dismissed before. They are more willing to follow an intuition, more willing to act on a thought that cannot yet be fully justified, more willing to have a conversation that might lead somewhere, even if they cannot see where. This openness is not naivety. It is the perceptual opening that the inner shift produces, and it is one of the clearest signs that the mechanism is working. The fifth internal sign is a changed quality of daily action. When Wattles described acting with full faith on the present activity, he was describing a quality of engagement that is different from the distracted, fearful, half-present action of the person who is waiting for the real path to appear before they can commit. The person who has made the shift begins to notice that their present actions carry more genuine quality, more full presence, more genuine investment in doing the current thing well. And this changed quality is not just a spiritual virtue, it is a practical signal that creates real responses from the world around them. People notice, situations respond, opportunities gravitate toward genuine quality. Not every sign needs to be dramatic. Not every sign involves money appearing suddenly. Some of the most reliable signs are quiet, a morning that begins without the heavy, familiar weight of the old fear, a moment of genuine peace about the future, lasting only briefly but genuinely felt. a conversation that takes an unexpectedly positive turn, an idea that arrives with a clarity that was absent before, a day in which the practice feels natural rather than effortful. These quiet signs are not nothing. They are the inner condition expressing its change. And the person who is watching for signs only in the external world will miss these quiet evidences of the mechanism already operating in the invisible. There is a particular sign that arrives when the shift is becoming genuinely established. A growing sense that the outcome is more certain than the fear's arithmetic suggests it should be. Not an irrational certainty, not a delusion, but a quiet, growing inner knowing that the source is already moving, that the desired life is forming, that the path is preparing even though it is not yet visible. This sense is not produced by positive thinking. It is produced by the genuine operation of the inner condition. It is the natural inner experience of a thinker whose dominant impression is faith rather than fear. And it is, in Wattles's framework, itself a real causative element. The inner certainty that the outcome is forming contributes to the formation of the outcome. The most important thing to understand about the internal signs is that they precede the external signs. The inner condition changes first, then the perceptual field opens, then the actions change quality, then the outer world begins to respond to the changed quality of engagement, then the new channels begin to form, then the external signs appear. The person who is looking only at external signs and concluding from their absence that nothing is happening is looking at the last stage of the process and ignoring all the earlier stages that are already in movement. The internal signs are the evidence that the process has begun. The external signs are the evidence that the process has completed a cycle. Both are real, but the internal signs come first. When you notice these internal signs, name them, acknowledge them, not as proof that the external result is imminent, but as genuine evidence that the inner condition has shifted. The practice is working, the mechanism is operating, the formless substance is receiving the impression of the aligned thinker, and the external form will follow the inner cause in the timing of the source through channels that may still be invisible to the current eye. Trust that, not as a naive wish, but as the law. There is a phrase that carries the entire teaching of Wallace Wattles in a form the mind can hold and return to daily. It is not a magic formula. It is not a wishful affirmation. It is a precise inner statement of the correct relationship between the thinker and the source. It is a statement that, when genuinely held, describes the operative condition of the mind that is aligned with the certain way. And it is the statement that separates the mind that is waiting for the path before it trusts, from the mind that has learned to trust before the path appears. That statement is this: I trust the source before I see the path. Let that settle for a moment. Not the source after the path arrives. Not the source when the evidence is good enough. Not the source when the visible world has finally cooperated with my plan. Before the path is visible, before the method is known, before the channel has revealed itself, before the proof has arrived. I trust the source before I see the path. That is the entire law in its simplest expression. And the entire teaching of Wallace Wattles, across every page he ever wrote, is an extended commentary on why that single reversal of inner position is the key that unlocks the movement of the formless substance through visible channels of provision. You have spent time in this teaching moving through the exact pain of having no visible path. You have recognized the invisible error of demanding a visible path before releasing your fear. You have been shown the mechanism, the clear image, the real faith, the genuine gratitude, the nearest action. You have been told that the internal signs of the shift precede the external signs of provision. You have been prepared for the test of the waiting period, and all of that has been in service of arriving at this one inner position: trust before proof. That position, when it is genuine, when it is the actual operating condition of the mind and not just the declared position, is the condition the source responds to. And the source, responding to that condition, moves provision through channels that the fear mind could not have identified, in timing that the anxious mind could not have calculated. This is not a declaration for the day things are easy. This is a declaration for the day you look at your account and see nothing, for the day the door remains closed. For the day the old mind makes its most compelling argument that the path will never come. For the day the visible world offers only the evidence of unchanged limitation. That is the day this declaration is most needed. And that is the day on which saying it genuinely, meaning it from the actual operating condition of the inner life rather than from the desperate surface of performed hope, is the most powerful act available to you. Because on that day, holding this inner position in the face of every visible contradiction is the precise expression of the faith the law requires. Wallace Wattles did not teach this as a gentle philosophical preference. He taught it as a law. The law does not care about your comfort. It does not soften itself for the difficult days. It operates consistently and impartially under all conditions. When the inner condition of the thinker is genuine trust in the source before the path is visible, the law organizes the invisible toward visible expression. When the inner condition is fear demanding a visible path before trust is given, the law organizes the invisible in response to the fear. This is not a punishment. It is the mechanical operation of a real law, and the declaration is not just a phrase. It is the stated inner position that aligns the thinker with the operative condition the law requires. Say it again, not as a performance, as a genuine inner choice about where your trust is anchored today. I trust the source before I see the path. Hear what that means. It means my certainty is not dependent on what the visible world has shown me this morning. My trust is not conditional on the behavior of visible channels. My faith does not require proof before it operates. I have chosen the source as my primary navigation, ahead of the evidence, ahead of the arithmetic, ahead of the fear's report on what is possible. I trust the source before I see the path. The masters who came before you understood this. Every great teacher in the tradition of spiritual prosperity, from Wattles to Joseph Murphy, to Neville Goddard, to Florence Scovel Shinn, to Thomas Troward, described in their own language and framework the same fundamental law. The inner condition of the thinker is the cause, the visible world is the effect, and the inner condition that produces the greatest visible expression is the one that trusts the source before the visible evidence supports that trust. They called it faith, they called it assumption, they called it prayer, they called it mental causation, they called it the certain way. The names were different. The law was one. You are being invited today to join the line of people throughout history who chose to trust before they could see, who held the image when the evidence was against them, who maintained faith through the waiting period, who took the nearest right action when the complete path was invisible, who released the demand for a visible guarantee before the inner alignment was established, who chose day after day in the face of the full pressure of the visible world to say, I trust the source before I see the path. That choice, consistently made, consistently renewed, consistently practiced, is the certain way. And the certain way does not fail. Wherever you are today in the visible world, whatever the numbers say, whatever doors have closed, whatever channels have dried up, whatever the fear mind has been reporting about the impossible arithmetic of your situation, the law is still operating. The source has not stopped. The formless substance is still responsive. The mechanism is still available. The invisible preparation may be further along than the visible evidence suggests, and the only thing required of you, the single most important interaction available to you right now, is the genuine establishment of this inner position. I trust the source before I see the path. Make it real. Make it your actual inner condition, not just your declared position, and then hold it every morning, through every closed door, through every waiting period, through every moment when the old mind makes its case. Hold it, because it is the truth, and the truth is the key. If this teaching has spoken to something true in you, something that recognizes the invisible error, something that felt the relief of the law even in the middle of the pressure, then write the declaration in the comments below. Not as a performance of spiritual advancement, not as a technique for attracting what you want, but as a genuine inner choice to align with the source before the visible path appears. Write, I trust the source before I see the path. Let that be your signal to yourself and to the source that you have understood the teaching and have chosen the inner position the law requires. Write it because you mean it. Write it because you are choosing it today. If you are ready to continue walking through the teachings of the Masters, remain with this channel. The laws that govern provision, identity, faith, and inner transformation are many, and each one, when genuinely understood and practiced, adds a layer of precision to the certain way. This is not a collection of motivation. This is a systematic teaching drawn from the wisdom of those who tested these laws against the hardest conditions of real life and found them to be real. If that is the kind of teaching you are seeking, the next law is waiting for you here. There is a community forming around these teachings, a community of people who are choosing to trust the source before the path is visible. People who are practicing the inner shift, holding the image, releasing the demand for the visible method, acting faithfully on the nearest right thing. If you are one of those people, let this channel be a place of continued deepening. Every teaching here is in service of one thing, helping you walk the certain way with greater precision, greater inner alignment, and greater peace in the face of what the visible world cannot yet show you. Trust the source before you see the path. Come back when you are ready for the next teaching. The Masters are waiting and the law does not change.